Okay, good. Let's make a start. So welcome to session 17, the title of which is Education and Learning Environments. Okay, so next we have Dione Mifsud from the University of Malta, Dione Mifsud, and the presentation is entitled Multiple Walls in Limited Spaces.
Let me just explain the metaphor behind the multiple walls. First of all, Malta is a very small island in the Mediterranean, probably you know about that, but it's made up mostly of walls. Most of the walls are either fortifications, we call them bastions, and they're very high bastions, 60 kilometers of them throughout the island. So, imposing bastions because Malta was invaded many times. The other type of walls is the rubble walls. Basically, rubble walls are walls that delineate territories, fields. They're not meant to keep people out. They're just meant to sort of show territory. And this is a metaphor I would like to introduce because this is how we work. Sometimes we are bastions and sometimes we are completely rubble walls. So I'm Dione Mifsud. I have been working at the University of Malta since 1996. I became a counselor in 1990. I studied here in Bristol and in Malta. And throughout 36 years, I've basically been in many different kinds of situations. So because I'm approaching retirement now, it's time to start to look back and see what has been for me going on throughout these 36 years. So this is my story, which basically has three different situations that I'm going to be offering. So on the Mdina bastions, the Mdina is the old capital city. I can take in the vista that presents itself in front of me. Gentle rolling fields surrounded by rubble walls. The open and unprotected spaces in between walled cities were deemed to be dangerous places, where one became potential booty for the Turkish corsairs. Bells pealed and fire was burnt on the top of the towers to warn the inhabitants of the impending danger. It was then a mad rush for safety, as you were either in or out. Safety was inside the walls, danger was outside. It's a perfect metaphor for counseling ethics in Malta. One can adopt a bastioned approach, which gives security, or the rubble-walled open fields approach, which is open to invasion. I could see this happening in my counseling experience. Multiple enmeshed relationships, multiple roles, problems with confidentiality. A desperate attempt at trying to position Maltese counseling by giving it an identity without making it an island cut off from international professional ethics and research. These have been the areas which presented themselves to me in all their different shades and colors. My journey in understanding the Maltese context from a professional position began when I was a teacher in a vocational school. The school was a dumping ground for Maltese youngsters. Having read Paul Willis' monumental work, Learning to Labor, How Working Class Kids Get Working Class Jobs, I saw what Willis wrote happening before my very eyes. I therefore involved myself in counseling out of sheer frustration when I understood that there was really nothing around for these kids except factories and shop floors. For me, that experience was the catalyst to enter into a more visible public sphere, especially when years later I became a university counselor. From then onwards, my professional life has been dedicated solely to counseling in different roles. During the time I was a master's student here in Bristol, I became very interested in counseling research with Malta as a background. I started to be curious about the intricacies and messiness that surround the counseling profession, whilst at the same time I was enthralled that counseling on the islands went back thousands of years. So here's the first story, Hobson's Choice. Some years ago, when we say some years ago, we're speaking 20 years ago now. A man presented himself at my counseling room and asked me to write a report on him, as he needed to defend himself in the marriage tribunal. The marriage tribunal is an ecclesiastical court that decides whether a marriage should be declared null and void, as it would not have satisfied the criteria for a Catholic union in the moment of marriage. I told the man that I could not do what he was asking because he wasn't even a client, and I needed to know him before I write a report. The man became a client and started to tell a story of how he had married a woman whom he said he loved, but who he could not stop beating. Until one fine day, the woman left and started annulment procedures. At that time, the hearings took about 4 years to start after they were instituted in the first place, to make it difficult for persons who want to break up their marriage. In the meantime, this man started going out with another woman. A few weeks later, a woman turned up for counseling, and during her first session narrated how she had ended up being beaten up by her boyfriend, who was also going through annulment procedures. She came to see whether it was a good decision to continue dating him. From her description, I became aware that she was speaking about my client. I was then in a fix. My original client was her boyfriend, but I could not just tell her to stop counseling, as I needed to give an explanation, and I could not do that without breaching confidentiality. However, this woman was in grave danger of entering a relationship which was going to be similar to what the man's wife went through. I also had to be very careful to give different dates to the two clients to minimize the chance of them meeting. This explosive situation was solved when I asked the girlfriend whether she knew the reason for which annulment procedures had been instituted. As this is within the public domain, she went to ask and came back telling me that her boyfriend was beating his wife and she was risking going through the same experience. So should have the man. That's the first story. The second story is in stanza form, and that's called Friendship with a Price. And this is a story about what happened when I became head of the Department of Psychology and started a course in counseling at the University of Malta. Hi, Dione, how are you? It's been a long time since we last played tennis. It's like you have withdrawn from society. I'm fine, thanks. I've been under a lot of pressure with a doctorate association conference and the launch of our counseling masters, but I will try to play a game with you. Good for you, I like that. Okay, goodbye then. But before I hang up, once you mention it, I would like you to consider my partner to teach on the counseling masters. I would like to know where my partner stands, as we forked out a lot of money to get her the qualifications. Well, there are university regulations which stipulate that persons need certain qualifications that your partner does not yet have. So even if I propose your partner's name, it will be turned down by the Board of Studies. Are you sure it's like this? Can I check this? But I know you can do something about it. Surely you can influence these people. No, I cannot, and I will not do it. Please respect my integrity. I was not saying you should do something illegal. I know I am being blunt. I just want you to help my partner. I will leave it in your hands to do something about it. Please do not put me in an awkward position. I cannot do what you ask. Goodbye. Out of stanza form. That evening, I got a second phone call, and in Maltese, it went like Nuranjaw Shahaja, which means it's a euphemism for, do you want some money? I can give you some money for this to happen. So I hung up, stare for 5 minutes. I know this friendship is over. But is it real friendship when it comes with a price tag? I text my friend to cancel the tennis match. I've got one final story. How am I doing with time? Go ahead. Thank you. It's called a balbuliata, again in Maltese, which would be translatable as a hodgepodge. So the telephone rang and I answered it almost immediately. As I lifted the receiver, I listened to the familiar voice of a colleague on the other end, albeit this time it sounded alarmed. Patrick has had another tantrum, and I would like you to see him, as he will only consent if you speak to him. I knew the case well, as I was the member on the Children and Young Persons Advisory Board. Actually, I was the counselor on this board for children who become either wards of the state or who are taken care of by social workers, basically. Patrick, who was in institutionalized care at the time, had been given the chance to live with a family, and my colleague had volunteered. All had gone well at first, but it seems Patrick had found it difficult to adapt to family life and regulations that were imposed on Patrick and the other children in my colleague's family. Reluctantly, I agreed to see Patrick, as I knew that the reason my colleague gave me was true. As I said, I already knew Patrick at the Children's Board and knew his hard-headedness. And during our first session, Patrick spilled the beans. He was tired of the constant bickering at my colleague's home, especially by his adoptive mother. He did not like the values that were being imposed on him, and finally, he wanted to go back to institutionalized care. Excuse me. This last request was a shock. No one had ever asked to go back into institutionalized care. He asked me to help him to achieve his aims and told me that that was why he was misbehaving. I asked him to give me permission to speak to my colleagues and his wife. You can tell them everything except that I would like to go back into care. My colleague phoned and I told him I needed to speak to him and his wife. They came immediately. As I started speaking, my colleague's wife broke down and told me that they too needed help, as they were extremely stressed and were having trouble as a couple. I realized too late that I was too much in to back out. Patrick went back into care and then moved into his natural mother's home some months later. This was a great blow for my colleague, who did not weather it very well. He and his wife came for couple counseling many times, and later came with their children for family therapy. It transpired that Patrick had inadvertently upset the balance the family had had for years, but no one wanted to accept it. For me, it was a simple question of multiple enmeshed relationships and roles, basically the rubble walls we're speaking about. I had relationships with Patrick, with my colleague, with his family. These relationships were personal and professional. Keeping professional boundaries in such a small place can be extremely difficult. I know all my colleagues. In fact, probably I have lectured most of my colleagues. And I keep asking the question, where would we counselors go for counseling once we know everyone in the profession? In this situation, it was a case of rubble walls rather than bastions. Finally, one comment. My daughter always accuses me that because I have been lecturing all the counselors in Malta, she cannot go to a counselor who doesn't know me. And she says, it's not fair, and I think. Thank you.
Good.
Okay, great. So our final presentation is Naoyuki Yamada, and the title of Naoyuki's presentation is Encountering Difference in Writing Between Expression and Control in Educational Practice.
Thank you, Jamie. And thank you for all. Thank you for having me join in this great session. My name is Naoyuki Yamada from Kansai University, Japan. Today, I would like to tell you a personal story. It is a story about writing, education, and language. I have studied writing education in Japan for almost 10 years. But today, I would like to begin with 3 pictures from my own childhood. Perhaps the question I asked as a researcher began much earlier than I thought. This is a picture I made when I was 5. It was for Mother's Day. Thank you, Mom. And next to the picture, she plays with me She cooks for me. I love my mommy. Very sweet, right? Probably true. But there is one small problem. I didn't write these words. My kindergarten teacher, my nursery teacher, wrote them for me. Of course, I loved my mother. So, in a sense, these were my words. But the teacher spoke for me, and somehow her words became my voice. Looking back, I found this fascinating. My self-expression began with someone else speaking on my behalf. So, whose voice are we hearing? Mine? My teacher's? Or something created between us? 2 years later, at about 7, I drew this picture at home. There are no words, just a boy fishing. Probably me, and some very impressive crabs. But the problem is there are almost no crabs like this in the river near my house. So this is not an accurate picture of reality. And yet, I feel very close to my childhood. Perhaps it shows the world not as it was, but as I expected it. Then, at around 9, I wrote this diary at school. First, please look at the man in that picture. Apparently, this is how I imagined a child in Japan, even in the 1990s. I have no idea why he looks about the 100 years old. And at least he wearing very old styles, Japanese styles, kind of kimono, which is rarely wearing clothes, except for the festival. But anyway, I wrote, I've been praying too much recently. From now on, I will study harder. I wrote the words. This time I wrote the words myself. And that makes this more interesting. The words were mine. The handwriting was mine too. Nobody dictated them to me. But where did these words come from? Why did 9-year-old boy decide he had been praying too much? So had I really learned to speak in the language of school? These pictures bring me in Enosuke Ashida. Ashida was an important figure in the origins of writing education in Japan. He encouraged the children to choose their own topics and write from their own lives, which called seikatsu tsusurikata. It's life writing. But he also used the idea of keisho. It is difficult to translate, perhaps an emerging image. For Ashida, writing was not simply expressing something already inside us. Through writing, something unexpected may appear. But there is another side to Ashida's story. He promoted children's self-expression, yet he also happened to produce Japanese language textbook for colonial Korea and Palau. So his pedagogy cannot simply be called liberation. Perhaps, but neither can it simply be called control. Perhaps this tension was already present in my childhood pictures. My teacher's words become my voice. my own words echoes the language of school. So I would like to finish with the question. If our words are never completely our own, what does it mean to host a difference in education? Perhaps our talk is not to find the learner's true voice. Maybe the question is simpler. Can we remain open when something appears that we did not expect? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you to all of our presenters for three really engaging presentations. So let's open the floor either to people online or people in the room.
Okay, so this question's for Victoria initially. Victoria, thank you for your presentation. There you are. You mentioned that you have a partner of a black partner, I think you said. And then I was quite impressed when you said the approach that you have for your work on the continent is to impact, to spotlight the work that's already been done by the people versus, having it been foreign-led. So I wonder if you could speak more to that and how to avoid kind of an arrogant white savior stance versus a supportive white ally stance, which you do indeed embody.
Yes. Hang on. So I was just saying, colleagues who are online, allyship is a contested term. It's very rare that I would talk about my partner, but here it felt fitting in the sense of what I was trying to represent was to say that the Sustainable Development Goals run through that community of practice. As convener, therefore, they run through me to whatever extent, in whatever guise. And one of that is obviously the reduced inequalities and being more mindful. I've been with my partner for, I think, over 10 years. The repositioning of myself alongside him has at times felt shocking to me, that people would look to me to talk to rather than him. So there's been things there that have been complex, difficult to process. Also, obviously, there's some grief there too that I see or hear from him sometimes, how he is represented and perceived and what opportunities he might not have access to. But I think as well, when I said about I don't particularly want to be visible, I am visible. Recently we had the Vice Chancellor Awards, and within those awards there was a new category which happened to be Sustainability Champion, Living the Values, and I was one of 3 people who was nominated for that. I thought, yes, that gives me overt recognition, but that is not something that it was lovely, it was a compliment, but it's not important in a critical sense to me. It's a lovely thing, but it's not important. The important thing for me is absolutely the sustaining of the community and the showcasing of their work. They do the work. I am forever the inexpert. And that is always what I've said from the start. I don't have this background. I learn and I read and I think and I engage with them in conversations. And through that exchange, this thing that I'm calling a community as if it's an object, which it isn't, it's all of this directions of communication, this thing happens. I don't know if that answers, perhaps move somewhere towards what you want. Thank you.
So other questions? Yeah.
Could I throw? Yeah. I want to throw your fantastic question back to you. So yes, yeah, definitely you. You said, can we remain open when something appears that we did not expect? And I thought, 1, fabulous question. 2, maybe you could try and answer it.
Thank you very much. Very fantastic question. I think it's not unique one, but maybe common things. People can find otherness in own mind, in own myself. For example, when I use English, I feel not this is not my language, but I want to more fit this language, at least Japanglish or more. My name is Yamada, Yamada English. Let's say I want to that. So, but if I did that, I can't. Maybe I can't feel my otherness. I can't stand that things. And if we find otherness, it's it's that simple. Let's say, like, how to say, bracket, bracket. But it's not simple because when I say bracket, we very macho to the concept of bracket. If you find unique yourself's otherness, and if they speak someone, so you can cognitive that your own otherness. That's maybe starting point, but not a solution. But we can stand the starting point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I just make some comments as well because it relates. I mean, as you know, because we're in the same round table after lunch, relates to my own interests as well, especially in relation to education. So I thought what you expressed through your pictures was just so powerful and well done. And yeah, on the picture where you yourself seems to be your voice, it is your voice in a sense, but writing about the kind of, in a sense, the disciplining of yourself. You've been playing too much. You need to work harder. So is it your voice? Is it not your voice? I think it was really well put. And then thinking about that in relation to education itself. So what is education? How are we educating? Is it that we are just disciplining people into certain ways of being, ways of thinking in the world? And over the last couple of years, I've been involved in some conversations within anthropology about thinking about anthropology as education, and the heart of that is kind of rooted in Tim Ingold's work as well. And we've just had a publication on it actually, that thinking about education as an extupere, like a leading out. And anthropology, of course, is all about encountering others, encountering otherness, trying to understand the other. So it's that relationship between yourself and something that appears surprising or ununderstandable to you, and through that engagement of self and other, so we are extricated into the world, we're educated, we're led out into the world. That's for me is something of what I was picking up in your question. I don't know if you want to respond to that at all.
I try to quick respond, but when we talk about education or learning, we usually use the metaphor acquisition or participation. Acquisition is sometimes mathematics, or participation is perhaps this conversation is more community things, and this also have history and cultural things. But these two metaphor is not fully understand about learning, because education or learning is more another mission. Have another mission that is create new culture or encourage children create new culture. That perspective we need expansion. or in that sense, we need otherness or encountering otherness, but we can't not easily to cognition. That is other because totally different. When totally different. So, is that make sense? Like response? Thank you.
Thank you.
Jamie, there's
Yeah. So, Helen.
Hi, my name is Elena. I'm from Australia. I have a question to Victoria. I'm interior design lecturer and I'm also on my last year of PhD. And physical space is very important for me. To come to my classes, I have to come 1 hour early. For 8 o'clock, I come 6 o'clock. And it takes me 1 hour to set up my room. So to make sure everything working very well, you know, a few years ago, we have to sanitize tables, so I'm still sanitizing table regardless, to cleaning up, to put all the environment stuff and so on. So my question to Victoria, how physical space is important for you in education settings?
Okay, so physical space is important. In the context of the presentation, I see it as socio-emotional space rather than physical. So for me, space is a wider thing, though I totally take your point. I would think about the physical environment, so we'll come back to that. But in my heart, when you say space, I see relationships and connections and trust building and power dynamics and safety. How do we create safe spaces? So that's how I perceive it. In terms of, so having always previously to Loughborough been an academic working with groups of students, I would see the learning environment in very particular ways. So I would think about where people were in the room. I would think about how much I could see them in the room, how much they could see me. So I would think about the observation of everybody, the gaze that I gave them that said, you are welcome here, I see you, I know you. And the moving around the room that I did was also part of that, also saying, I am near you, I am a presence here, I am alongside you. Obviously, there's power dynamics that we could go into, but moving into the space in the physical sense, the physical environment has always been an enabler to developing trusting relationships and to fostering direct eye gaze that says, you are a member here, you are included here. I don't know if that helps perhaps in the reflections that you were having there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
So I have a question for Dione and Victoria, actually. So I have a fascination with and a love for metaphor. And so you're both using some really strong and powerful metaphors there. So Victoria, I noticed, you know, saturated with organic metaphors. And so my question to you is really about, you know, do you think, especially going forwards as humanity, that we really do need to be thinking with more organic metaphors? And if so, what kind of, you know, what kind of role does that play? And Dione, the image of the walls, the metaphor of the walls, the bastion versus the kind of rubble and open walls. I guess I want to ask you to do a little bit more work with that metaphor, maybe in thinking around the key question, one of the key questions your presentation raises, which is how can we help one another, whether we're professionals or not, within environments when everybody knows everybody else. And so what is the play between these two types of walls, the bastion and the more open walls? So yeah, I don't know who would like to go first. Yeah.
Let's start with the bastions. Because the bastions are very interesting. When you're in, you're safe. Anyone who's out however, is out. But the people who are in do not go out. So they're there, basically, and they're stuck there. And this is what happens in my country. It's a very small island. Just imagine a 15-mile by 9-mile island, okay? And with a population of 500,000. So we are constantly meeting each other. So, for example, in a class of students, people know each other, have been going out with each other, have had stories already with each other. So when they meet for the first time, they're not really meeting for the first time, okay? And they have come in now, they're not out anymore. So obviously they are sharing things there. And that is quite fascinating. Also, it's like living in an apartment. Everyone knows what's going on and tries to give the impression that we do not know what is going on. But you know, everyone knows. So basically, it's like that. It's like living in an apartment, trying to cover some areas and not allow other areas to come out, etc., etc. And obviously, because of that, these bastions turn into the rubble walls because we try to obviously put up these walls so that we cover ourselves with them, with addition. But it's really an illusion because everyone knows what is going on. And when we meet, it's it's like a gossip column basically because. So when I use those metaphors, I really experience them because they are visual as well. You are constantly meeting physical walls, and to actually refer to what Elena was saying before, there is a physicality. It's not just socio emotional. It's also a physical thing that you're constantly bumping into each other. For example, when I am invited to a wedding, I have an arrangement with my wife because I'm going to meet some of my clients there who will try to get a counseling session. And normally what they do is they corner you, so obviously it's going to be extremely difficult to extricate yourself. So I have this arrangement with my wife to sort of come and tell me, listen, there's this and that going on, would like to come, etc., etc. Because it's like that, it's all the time. Going to a supermarket, you're going to meet students, you're going to meet clients, you're going to meet, it's all the time, all the time. It's like you're never out of it. And if you haven't ever been in a situation where you're living in an island 15 miles by 9 miles, you don't know what it is.
Thank you. So coming back to the metaphor. So for me, the metaphor is, in one sense, a technical device, but that diminishes it somewhat. For me, the use of the metaphor gives me more freedom of expression, and it means that I can put that thing, so in this case, the community of practice, I can sit that community in all of its educational discourse away from myself a little bit, but through the lens of the metaphor, which is the gardening and the cultivating and the nurturing, I can then re-explore it, and I can have another think about what is it I am actually doing, what position do I actually hold, what are the relationships between people, what makes this thing happen. So in a sense, the metaphor allows me to objectify it and have another look at it, because I think that is critically important to my practice, probably to all of our practices, that sometimes we need to step back and we need to think, what is it that is actually happening there? And then crucially, if this community is to be sustainable, then what is it that actually is sustaining it? And what is the longevity of it? That I will not know at this point. So far, 3 years, who knows? But to reposition it in a particular way, and I think we do that with our other writing and other arts forms that we use, don't we? We reposition in order to think again and just to push ourselves to re-explore and think, where's the resonance there? It's also, of course, a technical device, as I started out saying. because it's a part of autoethnography to engage people, to make connections, to help people make connections, and to make stories memorable, to allow them, enable them to have a space in that same story to whatever extent they choose to take that up.
Simone?
Thank you for all three presentations. What I feel after the presentations is that there is not just a community of practice. I feel there is a community of hope, even in the small and tiny spaces you can manage your difficulties. But I find that quite encouraging because probably, Jamie, you know, I do a research with one of my colleagues about the question whether the young climate scientists and the health scientists will form a trans-epistemic community. And one term with others, but community of hope. All that you said gave me that impression. You are in a community of hope. And then seeing your pictures and addressing your final question, there is something that makes you able to go over that question into a new sphere of responsibility or control or whatever in terms of your writing. And that I found wonderful. And I didn't expect that prior to that session, but now I'm totally happy with that. Yes, yes. And I would like to hire Victoria as an expert for one of our interviews. And I try that later. I try that later and use your methods your friend used.
Great stuff. Okay, so this question is now for Naoyuki. Matiko, Oskarizamedes. Great stuff. So I finished secondary school in Yamaguchi-ken in Japan. And then some years after that, I taught at secondary schools in Fukushima-ken. And then many years after that, I taught at universities in Kanagawa-ken. And so no matter what I was in Japan, or no matter what education level I was interacting with, there was always that ubiquitous expression of anytime you have a nail sticking out, you have to hammer it back in. As in, anytime to a certain extent someone shows a bit too much personality, they have to be contained, yes? And that's an expression which is quite often used in schools in Japan for kids. Therefore, I think the theorist that you shared with us and his idea of actually bringing children out of themselves and so they can express themselves is quite radical. It's quite a radical thing considering that what the wider culture is. And I wonder to what extent do you think the wider culture will either continue to stoically resist that idea, or might gently integrate that into education and allow people to express themselves more, be it through writing or through pictures and painting.
Thank you very much. Thoughtful question. Yeah, exactly. And we Japanese, that's its premise. When writing is self-expression, it's because that history from Enosuke Ashida. But it's difficult to real self-expression because children see the teacher's face or imagined parents. So if children writing intentionally, it's all my idea, but slightly there is slightly
In Japanese.
getting so sorry. 自己表現だと思っていても、そこには微細な細かい統制コントロールが入っていて、社会運動にこれつながっていくんですけど、社会変革とか、もっとそのマルクス主義とかとつながって、社会を変えていくっていうふうになるんですけど、逆にそれがこう、批判されて、結局子供たちの好きなようにやってるんだけど、教師の手のひらの上で転がされてる。それがいい状態だっていうふうに、例えば戦争の時とかに、in the wartime, children write a letter to soldiers, and they express themselves butお腹が空いて I'm hungry, but I'm not hungry because of emperor. It's real their expression. だから本音がそうやってこう統制されていくっていうふうに、なって、そこをどうこう乗り越えていくか。レジスタンスとか抵抗をどうやって教えるかっていうことがやっぱり学校の中でずっと求められてきた。二つあるんですけど。ごめんなさい、なんかはい。はい、thank you very much. Could you
respond?
No, it was just all for me. It's mine.
Thank you. Excellent. Okay, we have reached the end of our session, so thank you very much to all of our presenters. Yeah, that was a great session. Thank you.